So here, just do a clear again. And this one, we're going to install DHCP. So we're installing, again, Windows feature. We're going to do DHCP, and we're going to include management tools. And as we learned from when we started the DNS, it said, don't bother with the restart, but it still wasn't running correctly. So we'll do the restart. Even if it says it doesn't need one. All right, says it doesn't need it, but we learnt our lesson. On DNS, so we'll force it to do a restart just to make sure that all the services start up correctly. All right. Righty. Come on, let's boot up already. Oh my God, it's midday. Wait, typing. And we won't do that one. You're all asleep. You're gone all quiet again. Alright, some of the servers won't fire up correctly, but will. So the DHCP server isn't defined, so we'll need to run this as the administrator to configure the actual group DHCP pool. So now the first couple of lines in this will apply only when we have a domain controller set up. Now, we haven't set up the domain controller yet, so we don't need to add the security group and the domain controller address in here because we don't have one at this point in time. So we don't need to add those first two lines. So again, I'll just slide this in so you know what I'm talking about. So the add security group for DHCP and the active domain. We're not a server within the active domain at the moment. We're still a standalone server. So we don't need to put these first two items in until after we become. All right, so we just need to do our basic DHCP setup. So we need to set up the scope of our service. So we need to add DHCP server version 4 IPv4 scope, and the name of the pool. So what name are we going to use for this pool of addresses? We're going to say it's the internal network, or we could just say in here, give it some meaningful name. I'll just stick with what's written there. Alright, this is just an arbitrary name. It basically gives you something to refer to, because you can have multiple scopes on the single server. Okay, so later on when you get into other areas, when we start doing virtual networks through switch fabrics, and what we'll do is we'll have a trunk coming to a server, and that server will have multiple pools of addresses, so multiple scopes, and depending on what network the client is residing on, in other words, what interface the request comes in, it will dish out an IP address based on the interface that the request came in on. So this is why you define your scopes and give them different names, because you can have multiple on the one server. Now, again, be careful. This is the slanting quote, not the upright quote. Okay, so just be aware those two characters are different. We want to use the one that is on the tilde key, which is next to the 1 key. Just make sure everybody is aware. So we want to enter the starting address, so start range. So we are in the 10 network. Okay, 10.0.0. So what addresses are we going to start giving to our clients? And might as well keep going with our addresses that are supplied. Now, one thing it's not the start, it's the end. So alright, so what we're saying is, when a client requests an IP address, we can give them any IP addresses between 200 and 254. It will not automatically assign any addresses outside this range. If you went from 0 to 254, you would then have to put in excluding parameters for your servers and printers and things like that that you're using. So cast your mind back to that chapter 11 of the CCNA course. When we're doing subnetting, we're talking about IP addressing schemes, and we talk about reserving numbers for servers, for printers, for intermediate devices. So basically, you keep them within a certain address range in every network, and then your pools, the easiest way to do it is start your addressing pool after that reserved scope of addresses within your design. Next, we want to put in the subnet mask, and this is the /24 that we have set up in our parameters, and we want to say we're continuing the options here, and we now need to set up the lease duration. So how long is the lease going to actually be available? Now, you stand at home and that depends. So I prefer to give it just for the workday. So normally it'd be a 10 or 12-hour time slot with 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Alright. See what I did there? I used the wrong quote. Now, that is normally days, hours. So, to be correct, you'd have 0 days, 12 hours, 0 minutes. Wait. Alright, what's next? We want to bring the state to active. In other words, we want to turn it on. And just like with everything else, we want to pass the through to finish it off. Did I tell you my typing was atrocious today? At least it was the key next to it. Does that count for anything? There we have. Alright, so scope ID 10. Alright, so it's for the 10 network with this subnet mask. Here's our name, internal network. It's active, in other words, that's one. Starting address, ending address, and the duration. Notice I had 00 before the 12, and it's just said, oh, well, that doesn't really affect the lease timer, so I'm not going to include it. Alright, so optional values. Will this work? Yes. But if you want to communicate with devices outside of your local network, you really need to include optional commands or values, I should say, within this scope. So we want to set the DHCP server version 4 option value for the DNS domain of ML network 401, and I want to say the DNS server is located at type in the IP address and continue the command. I want to set the gateway address, which we use the term router, because generally speaking, it's a router acting as the gateway. And we put in the gateway address. And we want to put in the scope ID that these need to be added to, which, according to our name here, is 10.0.0.0, and we want to pass through to finish it off. There we have it. So we now have these options added to our pool. So what should we do to make that pool ensure that it's working correctly? We want to restart the service, not the computer this time, just the server. Okay. So that is our scope. Now, I don't need to show you how to set a client to use DHCP services. It's a default setting, so you change it back to automatic and Bob's your uncle, so to speak. So that is DHCP. We've installed DHCP server. We've configured a pool within the server. Sorry, I keep saying pool because in Cisco, when we're defining the scope, we're defining a pool of addresses to assign out. As you can tell, most of my career has been dealing with routing and switching. So my default terminology can be different to Microsoft's, because most of my career I've dealt with Microsoft. Not. All right. Do you still wish to continue on to the next one? That is the question. That's the DHCP activity, so I'll close off this recording here.